Hi, welcome back to these sessions on how to create value in teams. Last time we looked at how to collaborate effectively in a team, as well as some of the things that hinder effective collaboration, such as social loafing and coordination issues. And then we looked at how you as an individual could contribute and add value into a team. This time we're going to look at how to run successful meetings. And I know a lot of you might find meetings a little bit pointless and a little bit annoying. And so hopefully by the end of this session, we can implement some tactics that will help you make your meetings a little less pointless. Or if you're one of those people that are sitting there thinking, why am I here? Strategies for you to approach meetings so that you find them less pointless. So before we can run a successful meeting, we need to sort of understand what the point of a meeting even is. Now, I'm sure many of you have been to meetings where you kind of sit there going, what is the point of this? And later on in this slide, I'll explain why that might be the case and how we can prevent that from happening ever again. But before we do that, let's think about this idea of meetings. In my mind, when you have a meeting, it is an opportunity to collaborate and share ideas. So in the real world, you are never, ever, ever going to be able to escape having a meeting. In some ways, it's humanity's secret weapon. So I know that sounds pretty impressive, but if you think about, way back in, the times of cavemen and cavewomen, we were having meetings to try and figure out how to take down animals that were far stronger, faster, and fearsome than us. So if we think about a mammoth or maybe a saber-toothed tiger or whatever it might be, one human couldn't defeat or bring down an animal like that. But a bunch of humans acting in a coordinated fashion can easily take down just about any animal. In fact, I think there is no animal that a bunch of humans can't take down. So we are the apex predator, and part of this is our ability to coordinate, and our ability to coordinate and collaborate come in the form of meetings in the oldest sense, right? So in a way, it is our secret weapon. And in the real world, even in this day and age and going far into the future, you will still need to continue to have and attend meetings. So you're never going to escape it. All important decisions are made at meetings. If there is a decision that ever happens and you think, well, that's a pretty big deal, how did that come about? It was probably because you were not at the meeting where that decision was made. On the odd occasion where maybe one CEO or some entrepreneur decides to do something on their own merit and they think it's their brilliant idea and they go and do it, normally that ends in disaster because one person can't see all the problems and issues that might happen versus a group of people. And so, if you have a person just go out and try and do something, more often than not it will fail because they haven't tested that idea in front of a group of peers. And I know there might be some sort of, attraction in trying to own an idea and do it just by yourself. But really, for it to be successful, you need to be collaborating with people, and meetings is one place to do that. So, meetings are, really important, and the most, recent and trendy form of a meeting is this thing called a daily stand-up, and this is from a method of project management called the Agile method. Those of you doing engineering might be familiar with this. Those of you doing marketing, I'm not so sure. When you go out into industry, I can guarantee that it will become a buzzword that you will see. And when you start applying for jobs, you'll see that the Agile method is also mentioned a lot of the times, and then you're sitting there going, well, why didn't they teach me this in marketing? So I'm teaching you parts of it now, and then later on I'll go back to the Agile method and talk about how it relates to strategy. But for this purpose, we're talking about the Agile method in group work, or how in the sense of meetings. And so what the Agile method involves is this thing called the daily stand-up. And believe it or not, this is a daily meeting. So for those of you that hate meetings already, you're thinking, what the heck? I have to have a meeting every single day? Yeah, and that's part of the success of the Agile method, and why all different companies are really interested in it is because it works. And it works because of this thing called the daily stand-up. And so at this daily stand-up, which is just a fancy word for meeting, it involves people standing up. So the theory there is that if you're standing up, then the meeting won't drag on. It's usually timed for about 15 minutes, and they only talk about 3 things. So at this daily stand-up, you report on what you found, what you've done, what you found difficult, and what you need to carry on or progress your work. right? And then everyone has ideas about how to solve those problems. And at the same time, everyone knows what everyone has already achieved, so they don't have to sort of reinvent the wheel, and they can move on to other things, right? So what you've done, what you found challenging or impossible to do, and what you need to carry on and do the stuff that you were prevented from doing. You can already apply this in your own group meetings, So you don't have to have a daily meeting. For this project, a weekly meeting probably is sufficient, but at those meetings, everyone should be sharing what they've done, what they found difficult and need help on, and what they need to carry on, right? So those three things are an example of how a meeting doesn't have to be long and tedious, but it can be highly productive. But why do people hate meetings still? So, I've just talked about all the cool things that it's enabled humans to do, from bringing down a mammoth to sending a rover to Mars. It all involved meetings along the way. And for you going into your job, you will have to keep doing meetings, right? But why do you hate it? So, if you think about, have you ever been to a pointless meeting? The answer probably is yes, right? So why is that the case? What made it pointless? Well, some things could explain the reason why you are annoyed by meetings, or the reason why you find meetings pointless. One reason could be this idea that you want to be doing work rather than talking about work. And this is quite classic, particularly in the New Zealand context. I found is that Kiwis just want to get on with it. And they don't want to talk about it too much. Just let me get on with it, right? And so if you're a meeting, you're feeling like, well, that's wasting your time, because that's time you could be actually doing the work rather than sharing the work you've done with everyone else. And fair enough, I can see why that would be one reason that you could be annoyed at meetings or find it pointless. What am I doing sitting here when I could be doing that task that we're just talking about, right? Let me do it. I don't want to talk about it. Okay, fair enough. But the problem with that is that if you feel like you're doing a lot of work, or you could be doing work, other people still need to know about what you're doing, right? And the other thing is, if you feel like there's so much work that you should rather be doing the work rather than having a meeting, well, the meeting might be an occasion that you can bring that up and get some help on this work that you're meant to be doing instead of going to this meeting, right? So if you're really annoyed that a meeting is taking up time because you've got a bunch of stuff you need to do, well, sharing that frustration at the meeting might be one way to reduce the amount of work you have to do and get maybe some help to take some of that work off you. Now, if it's work that only you can do, then fair enough. This is also something that needs to be communicated to the team, because that means that at this meeting they need to come up with a plan so that you can continue prioritizing this work, but they can do other stuff that does not involve you needing to wait on them or them needing to wait on you. Or maybe they can come up with a way of designing that task so that you are not the only person that job relies on, right? So we can see how this idea that I'd rather be doing work than talking about work is, it seems legitimate as a reason for not wanting to go to a meeting, but really the problem is that maybe you haven't been to the meetings that have then enabled your team to collaborate around this task that is causing you so much frustration that you feel like you don't have the time to go to the meeting. Now, while we're talking about this, the other thing to consider is that there is a difference between a meeting and reporting. So in my mind, if the meeting revolves around one person telling everyone what's happening and what's to be done, etc., 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 then that really is reporting. It's not really a meeting. And that sort of information can be conveyed most efficiently in an announcement or a report or an email. Because this is one-way communication we're talking about, right? So if you're just telling everyone what's happened and what's going to happen, and you're not looking or not requiring feedback, then don't have a meeting. Just report it. The only reason you might want to have a meeting is for the purposes of interaction and collaboration. So at meetings, there should always be an opportunity for people to bounce ideas off each other, to critique things, and to come up and brainstorm with better ways of doing things. That's the only reason why you have a meeting. If everything is already decided upon, and the team leader or the CEO just wants it basically done, then that really is a form of reporting, and you shouldn't be wasting people's time in a meeting, because there's nothing worse than going to a meeting that's positioned as a meeting that is actually just a report, and that you're sitting at this meeting going, well, why couldn't you just tell me that in an email? It would have been quicker, and plus you're not looking for my feedback anyway, so what's the point of me being here, right? So try and make that distinction between reporting versus meeting. And if you don't need collaboration for a particular set of information, then just report it and save everyone a little bit of time. But if you do have a meeting, then you're looking for interaction and collaboration. So what are some solutions to why people find meetings pointless or annoying? There are 3 A's that you can use when you set up a meeting in order to ensure that it is as successful as possible and that no one will ever think that it's pointless again. So if you've decided that you're having a meeting and it's not just a form of reporting, then the first A is an agenda. So the point of an agenda is to let everyone know what you're going to be meeting about, what you're going to be having a meeting about, and what you're going to discuss, and the things that require some sort of interaction and collaboration and brainstorming on. So the agenda should ideally be, sent out a few days before the meeting, because people need time to get into the right mental mindset of, okay, this is what we're going to be talking about, so therefore I need to do this other homework or get this task done so that we can talk about it because it's on the agenda. And you want to send it a few days in advance because you also want the opportunity for team members to add to the agenda, right? So if something is not going to be ready by then, they need to be able to say, can we take that off the agenda until next time, because we're still very, very sort of early in it and it would just be wasting people's time. Alternatively, if there's an obstacle preventing the task from being delivered before the meeting, well, okay, keep it on the agenda, and then the agenda will be discussing why that task isn't up to scratch yet. Right? So enabling people to know what's going to be discussed at the meeting in the form of an agenda will automatically make it seem less pointless to them, because all of a sudden they can see the purpose of the meeting and they can start thinking in a way that enables them to contribute to that agenda. Furthermore, if they see the agenda and there's something that is important to them that isn't on the agenda, then they should be given an opportunity to add their item to the agenda, because then once again that will make it less pointless for them, because all of a sudden they're contributing something and asking feedback on something of importance to them. So agendas are really important for any meeting, and you want to get them out with enough time that people can process what will be discussed at this meeting, as well as how they can contribute and alter the agenda. The second A are action points. So this happens near the end of the meeting. So the agenda tells us what we're talking about, we're going to discuss or think about at the meeting. Action points is what are we going to leave the meeting with, right? So agenda going in, action points going out. And the point of action points is to give people a task to do, right? There's nothing worse than going to a meeting where you sit there and okay, you've talked about a bunch of stuff, but then you're like, well, what do we do now? Right? And you go back and you basically just do what you've been doing, which then makes you think, well, couldn't I have just been doing this without the hour I've just wasted? Right, so action points then give you tasks to do before the next meeting, right? And then obviously you reporting on your action point becomes the agenda of the next meeting. So it's like a continuous loop. You always have agenda going into a meeting, the discussions, deciding on what people should do. So there you leave with action points, and then the next time you go back in, you have a new set of agendas and a new set of action points. And that is how meetings are used to enhance productivity and improve the production process of any project that you are working on. And the final A is accountability. And so this is, I guess, related to action points, is that with these action points, you don't just want a list of stuff to do, but you want to attribute those things to specific people or pairs of people or mini teams of people, right? And the reason, if we go back to a previous lecture on social loafing, one of the reasons that teams don't collaborate as effectively as possible is because of this idea of social loafing. And we discussed how social loafing occurs when people feel de-individuated. So they're no longer an individual, they're in a group, and because they're in a group, they're kind of disguised or camouflaged by the efforts of everyone around them, and they're no longer accountable. And when someone is no longer accountable, they try less hard because they're not going to be rewarded as an individual, and they can also hide their slackness amongst a group of other people that are probably working on the same thing anyway. So to avoid social loafing from occurring, you want accountability associated with those action points. So if we know that by the next meeting, we have these actions to be done, and that Sam and Steve are responsible for this item, while, Melissa and Sally are responsible for this other action point, then that makes them less de-individuated, which makes them less likely to partake in social loafing, so they're more accountable. And with accountability comes productivity, because all of a sudden, if Sam and Steve are sitting there going, well, we have to add something to the agenda for the next meeting because we have to report on what we are working on and ask for help if we need it, then we need to actually be doing this work. So meetings act as mini deadlines that occur on sort of frequent occasions that drive people to get stuff done, right? And it sort of ties in with the human's need for sort of social approval, right? We typically don't like to disappoint our peers. And in small groups, we really don't like to disappoint our team members. And we've implemented some other things, such as our peer evaluations, that make that even less attractive to disappoint your teammates. So if you have an agenda and action points, and all of a sudden you or a fellow team member are accountable for certain action points, and you're having another meeting soon, then that is going to motivate you to do that task, to complete that action point. So agenda, action points, and accountability. These three things will hopefully make the rest of the meetings that you run seem less pointless and hopefully less annoying. So I just want to finish this session on how to run successful meetings with a couple of things I'd like you to try. So at the next meeting, I want you to not say the following. I don't want you to say, I'm really busy. Okay? Because it's about what you prioritize. It's not really that you're busy, because you're no more or less busy than anyone else, because we all have 24 hours in a day and 7 days in a week, right? So time is the constant resource that applies the same to everyone just about. So if you say you're really busy, it's more likely what you mean is that you have other priorities that are more interesting, relevant, or important to you than the thing that you've just said you're too busy to do. We've tried to mitigate this to a certain extent by creating those three streams, from high engagement through to standard engagement down to competing priorities, because the point of that is to get people into similar groups of like-minded students that prioritize the group project in a similar fashion. So if you're in a competing priorities group, then everyone theoretically in that group should be, I guess, equally busy and less willing to prioritize the group project. But that's fine, because everyone has that expectation from the very beginning. Similarly, if you're in a high engagement group, then you could still be really busy, but theoretically, this group project should be of higher priority to you. So anything related to this group project should result in you saying, I'm really busy, far less often. And in any case, you shouldn't be saying, I'm really busy, because everyone else has got the same amount of time you have. And so really it's about priorities. The other thing I don't want you to say is, I'll try. And so there's that famous quote from Yoda, do or do not, there is no try, that really says it all, right? You either do it or you don't. Saying I'll try is just, creating an ambiguous expectation, and it really makes people unable to do what they want to do if they're relying on you, because they don't know if you're going to do it, or they think you might do it, and so it kind of like puts their plans on hold because they're not sure what you're going to deliver. So you're better off saying, I can't do it, or I will do it, because then at least they can move on. They can either get someone else to do it because they're not sure, or they can get someone to do it because they are sure you can't deliver, and that's kinder in the short term and the long term, versus holding them on sort of on tenterhooks and having them sit there waiting for you. Is he going to get it done, or isn't he going to get it done? And so don't say I'll try. Just say you can do it or you can't do it. Now, if you keep saying you can't do it, then that's going to obviously wear a little bit thin on your team members, right? So the whole point of this entire session on group skills is how to work in a team. So if you're constantly saying, I can't do whatever it is your teammates need you to do, then you probably shouldn't be working in a team. And we've already established that working in a team is 100% necessary to any industry that you're going to go into, right? So you're always going to be working in teams. You're always going to be having these meetings. I don't want you to say, I'll try. So what can you do? Instead of saying, I can't do it all the time. So, Instead, I want you to say, okay, I'll work on it give them a date and give them a time. Because then that makes you think all of a sudden, okay, there's this task that they're wanting me to do. It's obviously important. That's why they're asking me to do it. Otherwise, they would do it themselves probably, because usually people don't like to ask for help. So if they're asking you to do something already, you know it's kind of important to them. And if you can't do it because you're too busy or you have other priorities, well, it's really about scheduling and time management at that point. Okay, so if you've got some, competition that you're competing in, or some sort of major family event, or a medical procedure, or whatever it might be, okay, that fair enough might be a priority, and it just means that the group project task needs to take a back step, but you should still be able to figure out and schedule when that back step occurs. So that's why if you say, okay, I'll work on it on Monday at 5 p.m. after my work, that at least makes you accountable for what you've just promised to do, and it lets them know when you're going to be able to work on it. So if Monday 5 p.m. is way too late because you're having the meeting on Tuesday, then okay, at least they know now that they can't ask you to do this. They'll give you something else to do maybe, and then they'll get someone else that they can do it, or it might mean that they have to do it themselves, but at least they're not waiting for you to try to do it, right? So really give this a go. Say, when you work on it, the day and the time, because that makes it really concrete. And then it almost forces you to work on that because you've just said that you would, right? And hopefully it's not just a day and time that you throw out there. We really want you to consider your calendar, because this is part of time management, which is an essential part of not only an individual career, but teamwork, right? So you need to be able to look at your calendar and say, okay, I've found this time here which I can use to prioritize this task, and I will do it. And hopefully it's within a time frame that the rest of your team can live with. And if it's not, and it continues to be a time frame that they can't, then you really have to ask, are you in that right stream?